Hello and welcome to Cloud Speed by Deloitte. In this regular podcast series, we'll delve into the world of cloud, answering some of those tricky questions, getting to grips with all that cloud has to offer, and keeping you up to speed on recent developments. So let's begin, shall we? Here's your host, Adam Gorguri.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to another episode of Cloud Speed by Deloitte. I'm Adam Gogarty, a director in our cloud engineering practice at Deloitte, and I'll be your host for this episode. M&A activity across the globe continues at pace, with more than 92% of respondents expecting deal volume to increase or stay the same over the next 12 months, according to Deloitte's 2022 Future of M&A Trends survey. On the operational side, cloud is enabling a faster process end-to-end in the M&A cycle, supporting easier integration and migration to unlock deal value. In the market itself, cloud acquisitions are moving at pace, be that activity across the hyperscale providers, such as Google's $5 billion acquisition of Mandiant, or Salesforce's notable acquisition of Slack. To talk more about this topic, today I'm delighted to be joined by my colleagues Sriram Prakash and Will Beach. Sriram and Will, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Thank you, Adam. A warm hello to our podcast listeners. I'm Sriram Prakash. I'm the global leader for M&A Insight, which is our thought leadership function, and also for disruptive M&A, where we help our clients invest and acquire assets that are disrupting their markets. Outside of work, I loved playing tennis, also watching tennis, and a treasured memory is when I was in a meet and greet with the great man himself, Roger Federer.
I can't compete with meeting Roger Federer, but it's lovely to meet you all. My name is Will Beach. I lead our technology transformation and M&A business within TMT. And outside of work, you can find me either being very competitive on a sports field or hiking somewhere up a mountain.
Brilliant, and it's great to have you both. So I guess, Sriram, to kick us off, cloud and M&A, what's the deal?
Well, Adam, one simply can't understate the importance of cloud, both as a driver for M&A activity as well as an enabler for M&A deals. Last year, as you referenced earlier, there was a record-breaking $5 trillion worth of deals. And this was at a time when the world was in and out of lockdowns. And most of these deals were done virtually, and I heard so many stories where drones were used to inspect the factory floor. So the rapid adoption of cloud-based technologies was such a key part of driving these M&A transactions. Both advisors like Deloitte and our clients adopted cloud, and it was absolutely instrumental in getting these deals over the line. We have a saying in M&A that the real work starts only when the ink begins to dry. That simply means that M&A can only deliver value if synergies are realized, and cloud strategies are such an integral part of delivering these synergies. And of course, subsequent value creation long after the deals are done. So at the same time, it's also not surprising that the cloud market was one of the most active segments within the technology sector. Last year alone, we estimate about 60 billion worth of deals were done in the cloud segment. That's about nearly triple that of 2020. And that was the effect that pandemic-led cloud adoption across all sectors had on this particular segment. There were massive deals, such as the mammoth Salesforce Slack. And very recently, AMD acquired Pensando, a startup that is barely a few years old. Will, what do you think?
I think there's a really interesting meta point to cloud and M&A, and that is neatly summarized as cloud has actually stimulated global M&A activity. It's created the ability for organizations, particularly startups, to build their businesses quickly without some of the tethers and constraints that we saw in the early part of this century. And what that means is that emulation, and what that means is innovation is actually stimulated. And so we see a more diverse marketplace, and we see much more M&A activity because of these new companies. And so if you look at cloud, it's not just a tool that organizations are using to drive M&A, and we can get into some of that later, but it's actually itself a driver of M&A in the marketplaces.
Yeah, it's fascinating, really. And I suppose Sriram, you talked about startups in the cloud space and the interest around those and acquisitions that you're seeing. So I guess are you seeing the use of cloud changing the way that companies themselves are actually valued?
Absolutely. Economic conditions gave such an extraordinary boost to the valuation of the cloud companies. There's an index called the NASDAQ Emerging Cloud Index that tracks the performance of these cloud companies in the US. And they reported in 2021 that collectively, these top 100 cloud companies, they were valued at about something like 2.2 trillion. And pre-pandemic, the same companies were valued at 1 trillion. That's doubling the value thanks to the adoption of cloud by various sectors. But cloud can also drive value for lots of companies and lots of sectors, potentially give a boost in valuation as well. After all, cloud is nothing but helping saving costs, improving efficiency. These are key drivers to boost EBITDA margins. And EBITDA margins is something which is fairly tangible, and this can be, of course, measured through return on investments. But at the same time, cloud, as Will was alluding to, it's also a huge driver of innovation, which is a bit more intangible. You can't just measure that. And that's why companies need to learn to tell stories about how they're adopting cloud, how they are creating long-term value. And that inevitably adds to their valuation. And may I add that also the buyers, particularly private equity buyers, are undertaking pretty comprehensive technology due diligence because technology, cloud, are such key drivers of post-deal value creation. So yeah, absolutely agree. Cloud is driving valuations all across. Will, do you have any thoughts to add?
I think that there's an interesting point around how organizations are valued based upon the multiples of their revenue and their EBIT. And cloud directly impacts, cloud spend and the way that that is accounted for directly impacts an organization's value. I think there's also an intangible value that cloud adds to an organization in terms of the flexibility and agility to innovate and enter new markets. And of course, you can't put that on a balance sheet, but what you can do is look at an organization through the lens of what does it bring in terms of you acquiring it to enter new markets or to pivot your products and services. And I think cloud is at the heart of enabling organizations to unlock some of that flexibility.
Completely agree. And I guess, Sriram, you talked about the point in which the hardware really starts is when the ink is dry on the contracts. And I think Will and I can attest to that, having worked in the actual integration part of the project. But actually there is a tremendous amount of work up to the point in which the ink is dry. So I suppose, are you seeing a role in cloud in that actual M&A process itself before the deal's done?
Adam, one thing I'll agree with you, there's tremendous amount of work, quite a lot of work, lots and lots of burning the midnight oil. Yes, there's huge amounts of work, but also bear in mind, I think first and foremost, the M&A process, the process of diligence, the process of M&A strategy, and then during the deal itself, there are three things which are paramount: confidentiality, speed of execution, and of course, efficient processes. So the adoption of virtual deal rooms are pretty much now becoming fast industry standards across the M&A process. And it allows us to store data securely, share data, collaborate more efficiently. All these were backbones of the virtual deal making over the last 2 years. And it is really, really helpful because it allows us to play with vast quantities of data, which are exchanged in a fairly short space of time. And Will, probably you can offer more perspectives on the integration aspects of M&A.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I would say about cloud and the actual technical integration is that for me, it's driving extremes. And I don't mean this in a negative way. I mean this in terms of the practicalities of integrating two organizations are either made vastly more simple by the cloud and an organization's adoption of the cloud, or they are made vastly more complex. I think you have on one end of the scale, on the more simple end, it's cleaner, especially when that's two organizations that are merging or one that's been acquired where they are operating with the same cloud vendor. You don't have that set of concerns with how we join together two data centers, how we reconfigure MPLS and WAN to work across new sites. You don't have chain impact on security. There's less mismatches of policies, management, processes, and team skill sets. But on the opposite end of the scale, if you work with organizations who are acquiring another organization where actually it's a very fragmented cloud vendor landscape and different workflows are happening across different cloud providers, then you end up in a world where making decisions on the long-term architecture and a long-term vendor landscape become quite tricky, whether that be direct challenges in different vendors, AWS to Google, or whether that just be about general strategic direction and splitting workflows over different vendors and mitigating corporate risk. You enter a world where actually it takes longer to make decisions about how to integrate the organization because there are more strategic questions to answer. And I think that middle ground between the two extremes, actually we're seeing less. The complexity is either extensive and long-term or extremely simplified. I think there's also been a change in the way that cloud is engaging or causing different stakeholders to engage with integration delivery. In the past, you had a largely owned and operated presence or quite singular presence of data center team, maybe a NOC team that were involved in the integration planning. So small scale stakeholder engagement, critical, but small in scale. But what cloud brings is a far broader set of stakeholders during an integration to manage or to work alongside, whether that be third-party hyperscalers, GCP, AWS, whether that be integrators, professional services firms and service integrators, systems integrators, or whether that be the general ecosystem of vendors you see around those other third parties. It means that there's a much greater need for cross-vendor collaboration and integration that is delivered not just by one or two parties directly talking to each other, but by actually an ecosystem of vendors. And that means that at scale, you have to change and evolve the way and really mature the way you deliver integration projects. I think there's a third, more subtle point around talent and how cloud M&A and talent come together to just mean that more focus during an integration or separation is required on the skill sets, the people, the teams, the engineering talent that you need to be able to deliver on these integrations and separations. It changes the skill sets, and it means that you need, in some cases, quite specialist skill sets to be able to deliver the integrations or the M&A transactions. And also, in the long term, particularly where one organization is more mature and a larger adopter of the cloud than another organization, it changes the makeup of that organization and the distribution of skill sets, which means that not only do you need to make sure you've got the right talent, but you need to make sure that organizationally you are structured effectively between the two entities that are either coming together or are divesting. Adam, I don't know whether you've got any additions from our work together.
Absolutely, and I suppose we dive into that war for talent and cloud and digital skills in one of our other Cloud Speed episodes, and it's a huge driver for many organisations at the moment. I suppose there's probably 2 points that I reflected on as you explored that IT integration process, Will. The first one's quite interesting, and I suspect this didn't really exist in a world when we had traditional IT. But the levels of investment that are actually available from some of the hyperscalers through their standard investment programs to support integration, actually. So I do wonder, Sriram, if even that's part of the M&A deal consideration when you're actually working out the cost of integration and I suppose the investment funds that are available.
Absolutely, Adam. This is a core part of your synergy and value creation plan. All these are tracked, studied, and presented, but more importantly, your stakeholders, your shareholders are going to hold you accountable. They will be keeping a very close watch eye to see how you're delivering those synergies, how fast, and they will be asking hard questions. How fast is the migration going and so forth?
Fascinating, really. And I guess the second point I thought about was, in a world of traditional IT, really with all of that, these business applications and software running within quite a constrained, bounded context of a data center, and lots of different kind of software licenses. I suppose what we're absolutely seeing is the increased adoption of smaller software as a service offerings as well across the enterprise. And so I can only imagine that really as that continues, particularly as part of an integration, you can imagine the range of software as a service products that organizations are consuming. And I suppose in some ways that might make integration easier, but in others potentially more complex. So lots for organizations to think about going through this process. But I guess one lens we often like to think about is actually, are we seeing any different trends across different industries on this topic? So Sriram, what's your thoughts there?
Well, Adam, it's a difficult one because on one hand, cloud impacts all sectors. I can hardly think of a sector or a CIO saying cloud is not important for me. Every sector it matters. But probably there are going to be certain sectors which are going to be fast adopters. I suspect sectors that have significant volumes of data or perhaps depend on high frequency assessment of data. And these could include sectors like banking, capital markets, digital streaming media. All of these would be fast adopters for not just cloud, but all the associated innovations which are coming as the result of cloud. It's a difficult one, Adam, because I think cloud impacts every sector, and it'll be hard pressed to find a CIO who would be saying that cloud is not a top priority. But at the same time, there will probably be certain sectors which will be fast movers, and those would be sectors which are typically dealing with significant volumes of data, or perhaps depend on high frequency assessment of data. And here I'm thinking about sectors like banking, capital markets, digital media streaming. These will certainly be fast movers in cloud, but also all the associated innovations due to cloud technologies. But also a good indicator to see where sectors are at is to look into what sort of companies, what sort of cloud specialists were acquired in the recent years. So what we found was that in recent months, there's been heavy demand for cloud specialists in the consumer sector and health. And both these sectors greatly benefit from connected data and personalized customer experience, be it for personalized healthcare or personalized customer retailing and so forth. So this is certainly going to drive cloud adoption in these two sectors as well. Will, your perspectives?
Yeah, I think within TMT, there are quite contrasting approaches. Within high tech, for example, the compute power that's required to design some of the chips, it means that there is an intentional on-premise data center driven approach to how these organizations build their products. And it's only just becoming possible for them to find the level of power that they need. I think within TMT, it's hard to say, as there are contrasting views and contrasting approaches depending on where organizations operate. For example, in high tech, where the compute power and the speed of processing is so essential to being able to design, for example, microchips and processors, I think it's only just becoming possible for organizations to balance design and compiling and runtime calculations across cloud and data centers. And that means that they have a disproportionately large data center physical presence because it's high custom, high speed requirements that, like I said, until recently, the cloud just hasn't been able to provide at the right scale. But then you look at broadcasting, and those organizations are looking at mergers and acquisitions as a way to stimulate a move from traditional on-premise broadcasting technology to cloud-enabled broadcasting technology. And the transaction is the catalyst for that transformation. I think within telco, it's a mixed story because the scale of telco operations and the complexity of their products from a networking and infrastructure perspective means that their size and their approach differs per organization. I think it's a real mixed bag.
Just even in the few topics we've covered there's a tremendous amount for our clients to think about, really. So I suppose, Will, what kind of help are our clients actually asking for in this space?
So I guess just picking up on one of the themes from the last discussion, it's no longer about cloud as an enabler for enterprise technology and how M&A creates opportunities to transform cloud as an enabler for enterprise technology. It's increasingly becoming every single client and every single M&A transactions needs to think about how their technology-enabled products can be merged, can be brought together in a complementary way, or how they can use the experience of both organizations to innovate and create new products. And so the ask increasingly is, how do I use the cloud to allow me to improve, to pivot, to innovate, and to drive value within my product stack, not just my enterprise technology stack? Sriram, I think maybe within FS, you've got some particular views?
From a financial advisory perspective, I think what they value most is our deep expertise. When we advise clients either on acquiring cloud companies or cloud being an enabling feature, they absolutely value our deep understanding of the marketplace. They value our deep valuation skills, our IP assessment skills, our technical diligence skills. And also, we have bespoke value creation teams which work on those operational assessments of cloud and the value creation story. So, all of those things are things which our clients value. And also, may I add, they also value our ability to partner with the best in class and our commitment to invest in new technologies to help our client service delivery.
I guess that's the really enjoyable part of working for Deloitte, isn't it? Really, Sriram, we always the ability to, I suppose, draw on all of that expertise that we've got across our organisation and our firm. I guess we've talked a lot about what's going on today, but Will, what's next for cloud and M&A?
More deals, more value extracted, more value created, more complexity, but more transformation opportunity and more innovation.
And Sriram, what's next?
If I had a crystal ball. Well, I totally agree with Will. I think it's going to be more growth. Experts are predicting anywhere between 15 to 20% growth in the cloud space. But the growth which I'm most interested in following is the growth in the cloud ecosystem. I think that's where the businesses of tomorrow are getting created. That's where the next generation disruptors are created. In fact, there was a recent report by Greylock Venture Partners who identified about globally around 300 scale cloud businesses, startups, of which 100 are unicorns, and collectively they're valued at around 275 billion. It's extraordinary. And those are the ones which we'll be keeping a close watch on, because they are not just trying to keep cloud as business as normal, but they are significantly improving on what companies can do with cloud in the future.
You heard it here first, listeners. More is the word of today. Some really interesting final thoughts there, Will and Sriram. But unfortunately, that's all we have time for today in this podcast. So I'd like to really thank Will and Sriram for joining us. It's wonderful to have you both on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Thank you, Adam. It was a pleasure.
So if you'd like to discuss this topic further with Will and Sriram, please do reach out to them via LinkedIn. As part of our goal to keep you up to date with developments from major public cloud providers, this week we have Sundar Ramaswamy, our Google Lead Solutions Architect. Over to you, Sundar.
Thanks, Adam, for having me over. Always good to be back. Mergers and acquisitions has been a recurring theme in the last few years, especially in the post-pandemic world. An increased number of organizations are wanting to acquire new capabilities and adopt operating models that accelerate their move to cloud. Now, there are different factors driving these changes, the key ones being access to innovative technologies, increasing the market presence, and adoption of newer capabilities, including artificial intelligence and machine learning. However, a common theme that cuts across M&A for all industries is that organizations are now having to deal with a more complex technology landscape with different integrations at a never seen before scale. Focusing on the solutions, processes, and people is vital to create differentiated value post-integration. And that is exactly where the unique set of tools offered by Google acts as an accelerating agent for realizing additional value propositions. In today's podcast, I will touch upon some ways in which Google Cloud can be leveraged in post-merger integrations to unlock the real potential of technology. Google's serverless data warehouse solution called BigQuery Omni provides the capability to query data even if it resides in other cloud providers or on-prem, thereby acting as a single pane of glass to manage data. That eliminates the pain of having to merge data and especially concerns around data licensing and infrastructure needs. In addition to data, APIs are an essential element to the success of post-merger integrations. Google's API management platform Apigee provide central monitoring and measurement of API traffic, which leads to better observability, more control over APIs, and increased optionality. Adhering to jurisdictions and regulatory oversight is another important aspect of post-M&A world, as organizations will have increased regulatory and reporting requirements. To address this concern, Google provides data sovereignty that gives the flexibility to prevent the provider from accessing their data. There is operational sovereignty that people working at a cloud provider cannot compromise customer workloads, and there is software sovereignty with which customers can control the availability of their workloads and run them wherever they want without being dependent on or logged into a single cloud provider. A fragmented technology landscape scattered across multiple CSPs and on-prem is a likely outcome of M&A and might result in varied skill sets and processes to develop, test, and release software across the different environments. Google's managed hybrid cloud platform, Anthos, provides a consistent development and operations experience for hybrid and multi-cloud environments. There was a recent Forrester study which showed that increased adoption of Anthos can result in more than 4.5 times the return of investment. In summary, M&A imposes a significant additional burden on teams, especially around merging unrelated technologies, processes, and taking up additional responsibilities. Google Cloud has a variety of customized solutions and design patterns to help organizations through the journey and make the acquisition more valuable. As always, thanks for having me over. It's a pleasure talking about relevant industry trends and trying to tie it back to real use cases. Back over to you, Adam.
So that brings us to the end of today's episode. We hope you've enjoyed listening. If you have, please do share this podcast with your network. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn at Adam Gogarty and check out our website at deloitte.co.uk/cloud. Until we meet again, I'm Adam Gogarty and you've been listening to Cloud Speed by Deloitte.